I'm going to ask Marcel Balfour to come forward. He is the acting executive director of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, who's just going to share a little bit with us about what's happening at the Assembly.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm here to share a little bit about what the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is doing with respect to the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and an initiative we call Families First. I wrote Chief Meaches some notes, and I'm going to pretend like I'm her. No, I am going to read you her notes that I prepared. We prepared. So you heard her mention in 2009 there was a date. That date actually is relevant for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs because the Chiefs at the time passed a resolution calling for a national and a provincial inquiry. That was in response to things that were happening and not happening in the issue, in dealing with the issue. And we figured we'd ask for Manitoba and Canada and you heard Justice Sinclair mention having something joint, mainly because we saw the need for both a federal and a provincial initiative to go forward. Manitoba politely said no. That's the NDP said no. But they said, don't worry about it, we'll support your call for federal inquiry. And of course, we know what the federal government's response has been. Since then, we've been doing a number of things, including assisting some local initiatives here with some rallies and actions. And then you heard probably on social media and others where the call for a national inquiry is either a waste of time or we already know what to do, so therefore we should just get to do it. So that got us thinking at the AMC, well, if that's the case, then perhaps we should just figure out on how to go forward. And informed, I guess, from not a perspective of armchair politicians or any kind of lawyerly approach other than saying, what have we heard? And the Chiefs have heard often from families saying that they themselves haven't listened to the families, that the police haven't listened to them, and neither the justice system. So we got to thinking perhaps what we should do is listen to the families first to figure out how to proceed. That's why we're calling this initiative Families First. So what we've done, in addition to the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, we've worked very closely with the Manitoba Kiiwetinowi Ogamaganak, the Northern Chiefs, MKO, and the Southern Chiefs Organization, SCO. And we've come up with something with a very convoluted title called Families First, Manitoba First Nations Ongoing Approach to Building an Initiative in Response to the Call for a National Inquiry into Murder of Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. We don't want to think that we know what the answer is because we want to listen to families first and we want to figure out what this actually means. This is a made in Manitoba approach that we've figured how to go forward. What do we need to do? So we've been working very closely also with the Public Interest Law Center, PILC, and we've been doing some research. And you've probably heard a number of people saying what is good and what is bad. Some of our research already identified from what the public announcements were from various individuals and organizations. 37 individuals of the 37 individuals that we've identified so far, 30 support the call for a national inquiry, 4 do not, 2 are cautious, and 1 support a national roundtable. We've done a number of other interesting works in terms of, I think you might also have heard from the federal government saying, we already got recommendations, we've already got over 43 things that have happened, inquiries and processes that have taken place. So we figured, why don't we take a look at what those processes are, where we are at with them in terms of what has been implemented and what has not. So we got some good work with that. And we've also taken a look at what you heard very well by Justice Sinclair identify in terms of inquiries. We also looked into roundtables and commissions and other potential ways to be able to go forward. So there's a lot of good technical work that's happened in the background with lawyers and non-lawyers. From that perspective, and Justice Sinclair again referred to developing our own process through our own Indigenous legal ways or Indigenous traditions. We're looking into that to see what that actually can mean or what that potentially can look like. Just recently at the Assembly of First Nations Assembly in December, there was, I think the Dene has already made a call that they're gonna make their own process and follow their own rules and their own laws to be able to figure out how to go forward with murdered missing women in their region. So, Families First has 3 phases. Our first phase began in September and ran till December. And the purpose of this phase was to speak with families and to define a framework on how to approach our process. So we engaged with 6 families and First Nations and communities, and with 26 representatives of community organizations in Winnipeg who comprise the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's Coalition. The Public Interest Law Center and the pro bono legal team concluded a number of other pieces of research that are really important in this area, including looking at the background on existing processes, on inquiries, commissions, roundtables, advisory panels, and case studies, the state of affairs and summary of existing research initiatives, potential legal tools for persuading governments to act, and the compilation of various recommendations relating to murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls from past processes. From this, a draft framework was created based on what they heard from the families. And among other things, the families heard that we need to approach this issue in a more inclusive and connected way. And many said that we should create our own process. Based on what we heard, we released a draft 54-page report in December at our Families First Forum. That was on the day before the AFN Assembly. And we found so far that our recommendations have identified that Families First should be guided by listening and hearing to the voices of families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, honoring and supporting families and their loved ones, including immediate actions based on recommendations we've heard from families in various reports, and bringing systemic actions. There were a number of immediate, systemic, and long-term actions that the families identified, and we shared that at the Assembly, Assembly of First Nations, where it was endorsed for support. The Chiefs in Assembly endorsed the Manitoba approach on Families First. Not to say that it's a process that should be applying across the country, but they're supporting what we're doing in our region. Phase 2 is currently taking place from January to June, and this is going to define what a proposed process will look like, including taking immediate and systemic actions. We will, as well, during this phase, continue to listen to families, elders, youth, grandmothers, and the coalition, and work with our continued partners of MKO and SCO. So some of these immediate actions have been identified. I'm going to jump over those. As a starting point, this phase will bring together all information and discuss further with families and others in justice, policing, leadership, etc., to deal with the underlying and the systemic issues and systemic actions. And the most important, or the most, not important, the most, what's the right word? The most immediate are to identify immediate actions that we can deal with systemically from the looking at what we've heard, combining with what Canada has required for the National Roundtable that's coming up. There's a National Roundtable on February the 27th in Ottawa, and they've already predetermined what this roundtable is going to be all about. It's 3 areas: policing measures and justice responses, prevention and awareness, and community safety plans and protocols. So we're taking what we've heard so far to put into those 3 and bring them forward in Ottawa. Phase 2 will also discuss procedural considerations, like who will be leading the process and other things that you heard from Justice Sinclair. Phase 3 will then be to implement the process that will take place after July. We want to get this endorsed by the Chiefs and Assembly in July 2015. And from there, in terms of how it goes forward, in terms of whether it's a national inquiry or whatever type of process it is, will be up for engagement and endorsement and going forward from then. Whew, sorry, thank you. Thanks a lot.